Hi there, my name is Brittany Dieter, and I am the vaccine educator here at the BC Centre for Disease Control. This is the Biological Products Management training. This is subsection 2 of the cold chain breaks in the field section. And here I'm going to talk about vaccine storage practices. Just going to go ahead and cover that up as usual. And let's get started. When managing the fridge, the first thing you need to know is that the fridge should always be set to 5 degrees. And the Australian vaccine management folks have a phrase, strive for 5, which is sort of helpful in remembering that. As I said in the previous section, you're going to place the thermometer in the center of the compartment, away from the coils, from the walls, from the door, from the floor, from the fan, and you're going to take the probe and pop it in the vaccine box. It's important that you limit access to the thermostat in the fridge, which reduces the risk that the temperature will be adjusted inappropriately. It can be encouraged by placing a sign on or near the thermostat that says, "Do not adjust refrigerator or freezer temperature controls. Notify biological product monitor or the backup if adjustments are necessary." You can see here, they're keeping the thermometer right in the center of the fridge. And that's just because, as we said before, there's a lot of temperature variation in separate areas. And so if you're, for example, if you've stored it right by the fan, then you might have a situation where the thermometer thinks it's much colder in the entire fridge than it actually is. And monitoring the temperature is so important. Automated systems provide built-in redundancy, but part of a quality management system is having built-in redundancy. So that's why they don't replace checking 2 times a day. And if you think about the airline industry, they're so good at having systems where 2 or 3 people or 2 or 3 systems are all working on the same point, so that if one of them fails, there's a backup. And if that one fails, there's a backup to that too. And with vaccines, that's the way we need to think about it. So you're going to be checking your fridge to make sure it's between 2 and 8 degrees, which is the recommended range for vaccines. The temperatures must be recorded at the start and the end of each business day. And that's important because A, you know what the temperature of your fridge is, so you can be very confident that the vaccine that you're giving is safe and effective. And number 2, if you have a surplus of vaccine, all of a sudden you realize that you ordered far too much varicella, for example, and you'd like to redistribute it, so you'd like to send it back to the pharmacy, those folks will then send it out to another health unit. It's important for that process that the vaccine always be in a monitored fridge. And I'll talk about that in the final section, expiry. This is what the daily recording form is. You can see here we have the section between 2 and 8 in this lovely clear. If you have a situation where the temperature is getting up into the gray zone or down into the gray zone, then you're going to need to take immediate action to correct the vaccine temperature. And as I said before, you can see that this clear section actually only goes up to 7. And that's just important to note because, as we were talking about with the sensitivity of some of the min-max thermometers, it might have a 1 degree variance of sensitivity. So if it's 7 degrees, it might actually be 6 degrees in the fridge, or it may be 8 degrees. So if it shows 8 degrees, it might actually be 9 degrees. So it's important to take immediate action. These forms should be looked at from time to time, weekly, monthly, by the designated biological product consultant. They're really only as useful as the people who are looking at them. And just seeing, you might notice, for example, that in the summer, you have consistently temperatures around, say, the 6 mark. So it's not that they're too high, but if there was any situation where it became unplugged, very quickly we'd get up into a range where the temperature is out of the recommended zone. So if you notice, for example, that always between the months of July and August, we're right up here running along 6 to 7, then you might actually want to be setting your thermostat a little bit lower, say to the 4, just for those months. So that's the kind of analysis that you can do if you're checking out these forms from time to time. As I said before, when you're sending vaccine back to the BC CDC pharmacy for redistribution, if you're choosing to do that, you're going to need to send in a copy of all of the vaccine temperature recording forms that you have, and that's a way of guaranteeing that the vaccine has been kept at the correct temperature. Vaccine susceptibility to loss of potency from out-of-range temperatures depends on several factors, including the presence of an adjuvant in the vaccine, whether the vaccine is live or inactivated, and whether the vaccine preparation is liquid or lyophilized or powder. With a plus or minus 1 degree accuracy on your thermometer, of course, you always want to remember that a recording of 0.5 could be 0.5 or plus 1.5, and you're always going to act on the worst case assumption, or the biological product consultant is going to act on the worst case assumption when using the vaccine stability chart. So 2 to 8 is the recommended range. The cold chain incident definition expanded in 2009 to include 0 to 2 as not constituting a cold chain incident with due regard for the sensitivity of the thermometer, but that would still require corrective action to return the fridge to the goal of 5. So between 0 and 2, you can still consider it refrigeration conditions. It's very important, as you can see here with this little penguin, not to freeze the vaccine. That's really one of our number one concerns. I think when we say cold chain, we think, oh, it should be cooler. But freezing vaccine is very, very damaging to a number of vaccines. So that's something to keep in mind. So if the temperature recorded in the previous form is in the shaded zones, but if it's starting to trend up or down, then you're going to want to take corrective action right away. If it's outside of the 2 to 8 or 0 to 8 mark, then you're going to immediately report the incident to your biological product consultant and then proceed per the cold chain algorithm that we're going to talk about in a moment. So if you pop in and the temperature is in fact out of range, what's the next step? First, you're going to be sure that the unit is plugged into a power source. If necessary, you're going to remove all vaccines and store them appropriately in another monitored fridge. You want to assume that the thermometer is accurate and protect the vaccine first. That's really the key. So even if it feels like, oh, doesn't feel like it's freezing in here, I think maybe this thermometer's wrong. Act like it's accurate, check the vaccine, and then work from there. So you're going to remove all the vaccines and store appropriately if it's outside of range. Adjust the temperature indicator slightly towards a warmer or colder setting as necessary. You want to adjust the thermostat so slowly so that it doesn't exceed the recommended temperature range. Then you're going to close the door, wait half an hour, and recheck. Always be striving for 5 degrees to stabilize the refrigerator temperature, making sure that it doesn't fall below the lower limit or rise above the upper limit of the recommended refrigerator temperature range of 2 and 8. Excessive heat damages vaccines by altering the tertiary structure of proteins, which causes the dissociation of polysaccharides from their carrier proteins. So that's particularly important for pneumococcal vaccine, for your meningococcal conjugate vaccines, and for Hib. And it also decreases the infectivity of the live attenuated vaccines. And you can see here, this is just, for example, what a protein structure might look like. So it just damages the bonds inside the vaccine. However, as I noted before, inadvertent freezing is now considered the most important problem affecting vaccine integrity. And I think in a way it's a product of calling it the cold chain. It really emphasizes that the vaccines need to be cold, gosh darn it. And I think maybe in our zeal to keep them cold, we accidentally freeze them. It tends to happen if they're either placed too close to the freezer compartment of the fridge. Like I was saying, if there's a vent coming down from the freezer into the fridge, you want to make sure that there's no vaccine there because it's at risk of freezing. Or big one is placing them too closely to frozen ice packs inside insulated containers. Preconditioning ice packs is something that I think there's some different practices going on. I know it was recommended before and then for a while perhaps not recommended and maybe re-recommended again. They come out of the freezer at a temperature of approximately -20 degrees. If you keep them at room temperature for a period of time before you put them into the insulated container with your vaccine, it allows the core of the ice pack to rise to 0 degrees, and that's called conditioning. You can tell an ice pack is adequately conditioned as soon as beads of water cover its surface, which is known as sweating. And so that's from a recent systemic literature review. There's different practices going on in different areas, so talk to your biological product consultant. This is a diphtheria, tetanus, pertussis vaccine that's been affected by freezing. And you can see what happens. Because of the adjuvants like aluminum that are added to the vaccine to make it more effective in the immune system, they can cause coagulation. So freezing damages sort of the matrix between the vaccine and its adjuvant, and the formation of ice crystals overcomes the repulsion forces between alum particles and causes coagulation of the particles. So all of the alum, which is the aluminum adjuvant, clumps together. The net result is a loss of potency. Rural settings in general tend to experience freezing more, often due to long transport times between different sites and big changes of ambient temperature. For example, up in Fort Nelson, you're much more likely to have vaccine freeze if you are driving it to a clinic because frankly it's minus 10 outside. Whereas if you're in Victoria, it's hardly ever minus 10. So you just don't have the same range of temperatures. In a study of hepatitis B vaccine, which is a inactivated vaccine, backing up. In a study of hepatitis B potency after freezing, the loss of potency was clear. In the settings where the vaccine was exposed to freezing, adequate antibody responses occurred in 71% of immunized children, as opposed to 95% of children vaccinated with vaccine not previously frozen. Packing for travel, like we said in rural settings, one issue relating to more freezing tends to be long travel times. Packing vaccines for transportation is an art unto itself with many variables to consider, including the temperature outside, the ambient temperature, the distance and time in transit, and the mode of transportation. The size of container and the amount of vaccine being packaged, of course, are also important. It's important to qualify a consistent approach to packing vaccines in order to maintain vaccines at the appropriate temperature during transport. The general packing considerations are: use insulating material around vaccines to prevent contact with ice and to prevent vaccine movement and transport, and that has to be something more substantial than just a paper towel. You want to maintain the vaccines in their original packing materials inside their cardboard boxes. Don't forget to add a thermometer and clearly label the package as vaccine. Just like with a fridge, you don't want to open the container more than necessary. A strong recommendation that's made by a lot of different bodies is to travel with the vaccine inside the body of a car, especially if there are big ranges of temperature outside. As we all know, on a boiling hot day, we're either going to turn on our air conditioning, we're going to open our windows, we're going to make sure that the temperature inside the car is fairly comfortable, whereas the temperature in the trunk might get up to 30, 35 degrees, and we wouldn't necessarily even think of it because we're nice and cool. I know that there are some issues that might come up around perhaps some liability issues if the vaccine is sort of sliding around in the car. So talk to your biological product consultant about that. And if vaccines are being stored in the trunk, then one thing you want to do is obviously keep in mind that the temperature needs to be monitored very closely. You need to pop in there and check on the vaccines, and obviously don't leave the car with the vaccines in the trunk. In 2005, there was a cooler temperature testing product conducted in mass clinics, and it's presented here mainly to demonstrate that vaccine cooler packing does change depending on the outside temperature. It may be used as directions if your external temperatures, if your temperatures match the information contained on the slide. More information on this project is available on the BC CDC website. If you go into immunization resources, and it's called the Mass Immunization Cold Chain Product Final Report, and it's posted right there. I'm not sure how much these configurations are used in your health authority for mass clinics, and I know it's a bit tough to read the slide. As I said, the entire project is posted online, so if you're curious about it, you can get lots of information. But what you can see here is that in the summer configuration, we're going to use fewer cooling packs or fewer insulating gel packs around the vaccine because the temperature is going to be warmer. In the winter, you're going to need more insulating blankets, and that's to protect the vaccine both from the cool from the ice packs and from the cool from the surrounding temperatures. So if you have questions about that, do check out the website. It's a very interesting project. This general insulated cooler packing diagram just provides a simple blueprint for packing vaccines. And it's much more clear, I think, than the previous slide. It's obviously to be tailored depending on your professional judgment and your temperature and travel clinic conditions. The theoretical considerations to be noted on these two slides are that ice packs should be packed at the top of the cooler because cold air settles. Vaccines should be packed with a temperature monitoring device always, preferably with a digital minimum maximum thermometer with the sensor placed in the center of the vaccine package. Vaccine packages should be loosely wrapped in effective insulation material, so that's things like bubble wrap or insulating blankets. This allows for cool air circulation around the vaccines and minimizes the risk of either very hot or very cold spots. You can see here we just have an insulated hard-sided cooler, flexible insulated blankets, which are preconditioned in the fridge to between 2 and 8 degrees and wrapped around the vaccines. Vaccines are obviously preconditioned because they've been in the fridge between 2 and 8. You're going to place the frozen ice pack here in an interior tray, and what that does is prevent the ice pack from inadvertently touching the vaccine. Some coolers have this tray, some don't, but the important consideration is just that the ice pack should never be touching the vaccines. This ice pack in this case is preconditioned in the freezer to between -10 and -20. Depending on your health authority policy, you may want to be preconditioning that ice pack because if it's coming out at -20 and if there's even a chance that it's going to be touching the vaccine, that's a very high risk for freezing. Thank you very much. In the next section, I'm going to talk about emergency management, and I will do that in just a moment. Thanks very much.